Hey everyone, Dan Olson here, back with another profound video essay. Today we are taking a look at what looks like a novel manuscript, just based on the look of it. The author didn't quite say what it was, but that's no problem at all. We are looking at Eli and Li by an author who calls themselves BestBoi. And if you like what you see here, BestBoi said you can message them on Discord at .bestboy. I'll put that in the description if you're interested. There wasn't really a content warning. The author said there's like a bit of blood, but otherwise good to go. So we will jump right into this, but first, as always, I'm going to read this. Keep in mind, I am not a professional reviewer. I'm just some guy on the internet who likes reading and writing. The opinions expressed in this video are only opinions. My interpretation of or reaction to the work will not be the same as everyone else's, for better or for worse. I will look for the good and the bad, but no matter what I say, don't be too hard on yourself. Just keep writing. And for those in the comments, please be respectful. Also, I'm so sorry for any mistakes or mispronunciations of names or words. If I come across a word that I don't want to say for whatever reason, I will replace it with the word blank. All right, with that, I think we can just go ahead and get into it. So, Eli and Li, Act 1, Iris. I assume that's how you pronounce that. I'm so sorry if that's wrong. Part 1, Chapter 1. It's just funny to see like Act 1, Part 1, Chapter 1. This is clearly a very intricate story. So, Chapter 1, Underneath the Blue Moon. The blue moon shone upon the shimmering lake, filling it up with a bright blue color, unlike any other. Okay, as a first sentence, kind of interesting. I don't love how we have the blue moon and then also bright blue color. I think you could drop a synonym for blue there instead. First lines are very important, especially in novels, and I just said this on yesterday's video, where the idea is that nobody is forced to read your novel. You're trying to convince the reader to read your novel, right? And so the first line really has to be a solid hook. And it's not that this line is bad. It is an important detail, I think, and it sounds like, the blue moon is going to be significant. But I think maybe you want something a little more catching than this. Let's take a look at the second sentence real quick. It called the young boy to capture its miraculous beauty. Third sentence, he stared up at it, waiting patiently like he always did. Fourth sentence, the boy's father had just finished setting up the small tents atop the tufts of grass and dirt. So, it's not that any of these sentences are bad, because really, they're not. Like, really, really, they're not. I love the clarity so far. I think that's great. But I still don't have a sense of why I should be reading this novel compared to any other novel, right? That's just my way of thinking about it. Obviously, there are a lot of other factors when it comes to trying to get somebody to read your book, but you don't want somebody to open this book, open it up, look at this first paragraph, and see that, there's not necessarily anything here that they can't get somewhere else, right? So I hope this is all making sense, and I hope it's not mean either. I promise I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to encourage you, the author, BestBoi, to start where the story really starts. Start at the most interesting point, and then you can put in all of this context after the fact, right? En media res, we often like to say. Start in the middle, right? Start in the middle of the action, and then you can give the context. You can sneak it in after the fact. What you want, first and foremost, is to captivate the reader. So I think I've harped on that enough. Let's just keep going. The boy was ready to flash his camera on the new memories to capture, new beauties to memorialize. The camera hung around his neck, marked with the name Eli on a dirty sticker that couldn't be removed. Eli's camera. Eli called the camera Cameron, a piece of work eternally precious and loyal to the boy. She was almost twice as big as the boy's hands, a tiring machine when he first got her. However, the boy was getting stronger with every snap. He could already see himself still using her in 20 years, passing it down generations. Clicks and flashes efficiently scattered around the campsite. Eli's father looked on his son lovingly, a smile finally appearing on his face. Okay. One thing I want to note real quick. So in literature, there's this thing called psychic distance, which is our personal distance from the characters and from the setting, right? So the farthest psychic distance can be is being introduced to somebody as if they're a stranger and as if you know absolutely nothing, right? So, for example, we might say, the year is 1846, the setting is Oklahoma, and this is Joel Jesus Martinez or something like that, right? So we know nothing. We're being introduced to this guy literally and this setting as if it's the very first time, and it is, right? But you can go in another direction where you introduce a character as if the reader has known them forever, right? Anyway, all of this to say, we've just been introduced to Eli, and before we knew him as Eli, we knew him as the boy, right? So the boy, that psychic distance is removed, right? Because we don't know who he is. Whereas once we zoom in, Eli, okay, the psychic distance is coming a little closer, right? We know now what his name is. And so once we zoom in like that, we shouldn't go back to the boy. We know that he's Eli now, and so there's no reason not to call him Eli, or really to just use pronouns at that point, right? There's no need to repeat Eli over and over. So we could rewrite these sentences as the camera hung around his neck, marked with the name Eli on a dirty sticker that couldn't be removed. So we keep Eli there because that's the first time we've seen his name. Eli on a dirty sticker that couldn't be removed. And then you could even delete this sentence, Eli's camera, because we already get that notion, right? We already know that. And then the next sentence would be, he called the camera Cameron, a piece of work eternally precious and loyal to him. So also let me add, I love that detail. I love that the camera is named and personified. That's great. In fact, maybe this is the first sentence, right? Eli called his camera Cameron, a piece of work eternally precious and loyal to him. That's kind of interesting, right? That would be an interesting first sentence. We have character, we have something precious to the character, technically a second character if we're characterizing the camera itself, right? So anyway, I hope that information was helpful. All that to say, once you decrease that psychic distance, you really shouldn't be increasing it again, right? We know who Eli is now, and let's just roll with Eli, right? Anyhow, where did we leave off? However, the boy was getting stronger with every snap. He could already see himself still using her in 20 years, passing it down generations, clicks and flashes, efficiently scattered around the campsite. Eli's father looked on his son lovingly, a smile finally appearing on his face. Eli always adored these moments, moments when his father could finally look at him. Even with his baggy, distant eyes, he was at least awake with his son. But it was cut short, just like always. A dreadful ringtone announced itself, and on the phone his father went. So, it seems like we're doing just a tiny bit of head hopping there, where uh, at first we're in Eli's perspective, right? And of course, third person omniscient narrator. But these days, even with a third person narrator, you're generally only going to focus on one person's uh, interiority. So we have Eli, but then there's this sentence where it says, even with his baggy, distant eyes, he was at least awake with his son. So there we get more of the father's internality, which I think is not exactly necessary. I think we should write this sentence more from Eli's perspective than from the father's perspective, right? Tell us more about how Eli is feeling about his father, rather than telling us how the father himself is feeling, right? Um, One more thing now that we've made it through the first paragraph here. Um, I like Eli so far. And I like his relationship with the camera and also his relationship with the father. I think those things are very clear. One thing that I was told by the same guy who said that a story that you're trying to convince the reader, the same guy who told me that also said that a lot of editors will dismiss a book if they don't get a sense for the stakes in the very first paragraph. And that's another reason why it's so important to start in the middle, right? You kind of get to reveal the stakes as the story is starting, which is super efficient, right? And so it's sort of toward the end of the paragraph where I finally get a sense of what the stakes are, where it's about Eli, presumably, and his relationship with his dad, presumably, right? So there's a lot of good info in this paragraph. I think it just kind of needs to be reordered, right? Put Eli and his father more toward the top of the paragraph. Eli and his camera and the father more toward the top of the paragraph. And then all the other details you can put more toward the bottom of the paragraph if you want to. So let's keep moving with all of that in mind. Eli would be patient. He had to be. This was their moment together. They both would look upon the blue moon together. Not a fan of the repeated use of together, but that's an easy fix. Just delete one of them. They would both finally sit next to each other, and Eli would tell his father all the things he wanted. So he waited, and waited, and waited. As his father's voice became angrier into the phone call, Eli felt that encroaching darkness that accompanied him at home, a darkness that sat next to him when no one would. It was nothing but empty, a horrifying void that touched Eli's core. Letting out a soft sigh, he gave up on his dream. He shook his head and glanced at the sky. The blue moon was right above him, and Cameron snapped it. But it could have been better. So he rushed off towards a fresh, more realistic goal. Eli needed to get the picture, the perfect picture, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Okay, that would be another great place to start the story, and then you could work in the backstory after this, right? Uh, those are pretty clear stakes, right? Eli needs to get the perfect picture, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I like that. That is engaging, right? Anyway, he didn't need his father just to take a picture. He could do it himself, but time was running out, dark clouds in the sky almost racing to the blue moon. Eli needed to match the chase. The clouds were bigger than the sky itself, and he wasn't going to lose his chance. In a minute, son, his father told him when he came near. The minute was long gone, and every second counted. Eli arrived at the perfect spot. Sorry, just want to pause to say, like, that's pretty good. Like, again, I get a sense of what the stakes are. There's a timer, right? Which kind of inherently demands that there's like tension, right? Because the main character is racing against a clock here. So anyway. Eli arrived at the perfect spot, the perfect position to take the photo with Cameron. The edge of a cliff, where the blue moon hovered over a shining sapphire lake, trees surrounding the paradise, quietly swaying in the wind, skittering of critters were heard endlessly, birds flying over the mountains in the background. The smell of fresh air and the poignant music filled Eli up to the core. Eli was about to capture this rare, once-in-a-lifetime memory. Okay. Not to nitpick here, but I think the imagery should be a little more nocturnal. Um, Skittering of critters and birds flying over the mountains. That sounds more like things you would see in the daytime, see and hear in the daytime. Not to say that there aren't critters who skitter in the nighttime, but like we know specifically what kind of critters do that, right? And so we could go even deeper with this imagery by saying like Eli heard an owl in the distance, and you could go into, what that actually sounds like, or, the chirping of the crickets, right, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, like I said, you can call that nitpicking, but I think we can get even more specific and even more creative with the imagery here. Snap, Cameron clicked. It could be just a little better. The blue wasn't in perfect view, so Eli took one step towards the edge. Snap. The moon was better, but that small necessary piece of the lake that would make the picture perfect was out of frame. The clouds were coming in quick, so Eli took another step towards the edge. Again, you can call this nitpicking, but I feel like if the lake is out of frame, like, wouldn't Eli want to take a step back? Because it sounds like he's trying to capture more of the landscape. And so just from a perspective point of view, you would want to go backwards, right? Again, call it nitpicking, but I think what you would rather say here is like the moon was better, but the cliff's edge was blocking the lake from from view of the frame, whatever, something like that, right? I'm no photographer, obviously. But yeah, just for clarity's sake, I think you would want to phrase it more like that. Yeah. Anyway, the clouds were coming back in quick, so Eli took another step towards the edge. Snap. Almost there, if only the mountainous region with sprinkled house lights in the background was in the perfect rhythm with the moon. Eli took one step towards the edge, practically on the last inch of it, leaning forward. He got the perfect frame, the perfect memory to share with everyone. Finally, they can respect him without pity. Finally, he can be seen with this photo. Just replace can with could, and then that sentence will be great. Snap, Cameron clicked again, and so did the edge as it crumbled beneath Eli's feet. Okay. So I think just, I don't know, one thing I want to say here is that, like, we kind of knew that this was coming, right? This was kind of the obvious conclusion as Eli got closer and closer toward the edge. And so maybe this section is just a tiny bit long. Like, I think maybe you could just delete one of these. Call it the rule of threes, right? Eli should just snap 3 pictures before he meets his eventual fall, right? I think that because we can see it coming, right? Or at least, I don't know, I did, and I think most readers will. That's just kind of inevitable as he inches closer toward the edge of the cliff, and so keep it a little shorter. That's all I'm trying to say. Eli fell into the bright, shining water. Glimmering either catched him. Glimmering ether catched him. Plunging into nature's depths, Eli struggled and resisted its wrath. Pain shot up his leg, his body, his mind as it raced. The water wrapped around his body, ready to absorb him. Eli looked at the blue moon. It stared back, almost stabbing into his collapsing chest. It waved goodbye as the dark clouds hid them away. Eli closed his eyes, feeling the water taking his shoes off and taking him away. It pulled him deeper within, ready to crush him. Okay, so one thing that one of my MFA professors taught me is that the the hotter the action, the cooler the words. The hotter the action, the cooler the words. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of editorializing going on here, a lot of like descriptions when really in a moment as hot as this, all we want to know is what is happening and what's going to happen, right? So if it were me personally editing this paragraph, I would take away a lot of the editorializing and I would just focus on the action. Hope that makes sense. No, Eli resisted. He shook off the fear, shook off the ravaging water infiltrating his lungs, and resisted the pull of death. His whole body wanted to give up, but Eli wasn't ready to lose his art, his memories, Cameron, his mother. Nice detail. I like that. That, yeah, I don't know how to say it much better than that, but a nice surprise, right? Because, yeah, I was thinking, okay, Cameron's mom is probably at home. Really, I wasn't thinking much about his mom at all, but that's a nice little reveal there, in my opinion. Eli swam through the blue ether, even if every moment the blue moon seemed farther away with each stride. I think you want further rather than farther. Also, you used the word ether before. I think there's probably a different word you could use there. You could even just say water, right? Eli swam through the water. Yeah, yeah. Eventually, everything just faded into that bright blue color. The surface was gone. Eli was losing, at least until a small glimmer of surface air peeped through onto Eli, telling him that there was hope. Um, I guess I'm a tiny bit confused. Like, does Eli not know how to swim, or like, why is it a problem? Like, I guess he hurt himself falling off the cliff and into the water, but maybe, like, make that more clear, like, say you can literally say that that's impeding his ability to swim if he does know how to, right? I just I guess I just don't understand, like, why he's struggling so much or why, for a moment, it seemed like he was going to drown. So, yeah, take that as you will. Um, I felt like I had something else to say, but maybe not. Yeah, we'll just keep going. Oh, actually, what I was going to say was, since this is such a hot moment, right? And since the action is so obvious here, maybe this is where you want to start the story, right? With Eli falling off the cliff, right into the water, struggling in the water. And as he's struggling, he can recall, like, how did I end up here in the first place? Oh, right. My dad got pulled away, as he always does, and he was being angry, as he always is. And so I tried to get the picture of myself. I tried to enjoy this moment for myself, and I flew too close to the sun, or to the blue moon in this case, and I fell into the water. Anyway, that was too much explaining. I'm sorry. All this to say, this is a great place to start the story too, right? This is the most action we've had so far. Anyway, let's keep going. His throat clinged to oxygen as he reached the surface. His whole body was in pain, all separated like scattered glass shards. The blue moon was gone behind the clouds, hiding away forever. He managed to crawl himself to shore, coughing and wheezing. Watery ether, again, use of the word ether. I don't think you need it. I think you can go with a different word there. Watery ether left his lungs and onto the muddy floor and his soaked jacket. I think we're missing a verb there, but anyway. The pain in his legs kept going as he laid there on the muddy grass, fidgeting with Cameron. He sputtered and cried in beeps. In beeps? Before giving up and refusing to turn on. Oh, sorry. She sputtered and cried in beeps before giving up and refusing to turn on. Got it. Eli kept trying, though. He wasn't ready to give up everything inside there yet. Everything important was inside there, but she needed to rest. He continued to lay there, staring at the hiding, faint blue moon while waiting. The lake didn't look as blue as it did before. Murky gray colors overtook the shining beauty it had before. Again, not a fan of the repeated use of the word before. Just delete one of those. Eli decided to wait, as he always did, and he waited and waited and wait. And then we have a scene break. The pain was still there, creeping up on him and coursing through the veins. His left leg especially, shaking uncontrollably. After a minute or two of trying desperately, Eli got up and made his way through the forest, the blue moon not even offering a single ounce of light. Buzzards, mosquitoes, flies, all sorts of insects scattered around Eli's bare feet and face. Hang on. Why is Eli barefoot? Did we know that before? I didn't. At least I didn't think I did. Yeah, why would he be barefoot? Like, even at the campsite, wouldn't he have had shoes on? I would have. I don't know. Anyway. Too weak to shake them off, he kept marching forward, past trees that he would bump into, past thorny bushes, past the darkness he stumbled through. Okay, I like this. This is kind of like I said, more of that nocturnal imagery that I was asking for earlier. Soon, Eli found a small house sitting neatly in solitude. He limped to the door, reaching the handle, locked. He knocked. Nothing. Eli couldn't scream well, so he kept knocking as hard as he could. Again and again, again and again. No answer. Eli crawled around the house, trying to find a way in. Nothing interesting on the outside, except for a generator and a window cracked open in the back. Eli tried to leap, but the pain surged in his body as he jumped. He tried again, grabbing the sill this time. He managed to pull himself up to the window, climbing through. He fell atop a marble counter, a ceramic plate falling to the ground. It shattered, shards flying across the room. Really? Flying across the room? That feels hyperbolic. It seemed like a kitchen was inside, stoves. Sorry, I don't think that sentence is necessary. I kind of think that was implied by the marble counter and the ceramic plate, but I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Stoves and ovens on the sides of the wall. Eli crawled off the ledge, carefully avoiding the stabbing glass on the floor. He reached a living room. Nice furniture sprawled across the room. Rephrase that, because we have room and then room again. A bookshelf with board games towered in a corner. A dining table where, click, a door unlocked in the nearby hallway. Eli's subconscious grabbed his legs, planting them still. White claws grab the doorway. Broad, dull, huge. Attached to them were long, large, void black arms. Standing on two legs, the thing peeked through the doorway. Two white spheres of light for eyes. They entered the hallway and stood still, waiting, hair reaching down almost to their waist. The only color dressed on this monster was the blue on their blue shirt, marked with something illegible. and the gray on their shorts. Okay, it sounds to me like this is where the story is actually starting, right? Everything before that was kind of prelude, but this is like the inciting incident, right? We have our main character meeting a literal monster, or at least that's what it sounds like, right? That is interesting. That's fascinating. That makes me want to read more, right? And I'm not saying that everything that came before isn't necessary, because it is. I like the characterization of Eli and of his dad and of his life and of the camera, and that can all stay. But this is where the story's actually starting, right? So maybe you want to start it here and then give all that context after the fact, right? Like, Eli meets the monster. Why is he meeting a monster? Because he fell in a lake and he needs shelter. Why did he fall in a lake? Because he was trying to get a great picture of the moon. Why was he trying to get a great picture of the moon? Because he was supposed to be seeing it with his dad, but his dad was being his usual dad self, right? Again, maybe I'm over explaining this, but this is interesting. This, I think, is where the story really is starting. This is, I assume, the thrust of the story, right? All the other stuff can come after this. At least that's my way of thinking about it. So, anyway, they tilted their head, standing still. Eli did the same, waiting for whatever would happen, whatever could happen, probably something outside of his own imagination. He didn't know what to think. Maybe patience would be a virtue, or his death, or whatever this was. The image of his father popped up. He would bravely scare this thing. They stepped forward again, slowly. Eli's eyes began to crystallize. His father would fix the pain in his legs. The creature took another step. Eli ran back to the kitchen, limping all the way, and Eli yelped weakly, ceramic glass infiltrating the flesh of his left foot. He fell on the floor, wincing. His mom would have helped, scaring the beast away, treating the cuts, and courageously dealing with this beast. Again, no need to use beast twice in the same sentence. Replace one. But Cameron was down and unresponsive. His mom wasn't there. The beast approached the boy. Like a grand monument blocking the way, it stood still, looking all over Eli. Their face was wrinkled in certain spots, and its mouth was almost hidden in the darkness of their face. Again, face twice in the same sentence. Replace one. Not before long, they turned and left through a room in the hallway. Eli took the chance to pick himself back up. If only he was stronger, smarter, anything but Eli. He would have succeeded. But he wasn't. He was still a boy. He was still weak. The beast came back, holding tweezers, a box, and a roll of fabric. They placed the items near Eli, then stood away from him. Nothing happened between the two. Only Eli's heavy breath breaking the silence, reluctantly. Breaking the silence. Reluctantly, Eli grabbed the tweezers and plucked. Quick thing. I am not a huge fan of ellipses. We've seen a few of them so far. One of my professors, who I think I've already mentioned in this video so far, he says that ellipses are just replacements for action, for something that a character is doing, right? Because presumably there's something happening in this space, right? Even though it says nothing happened between the two. Only Eli's heavy breath breaking the silence. That's what's happening, right? That's what the ellipses are trying to signify, is that things are quiet and tense and you can only hear the sound of breathing. So show us that, right? Rather than using the ellipses. Yeah. And like, if you use ellipses too many times, the reader's gonna notice, right? I certainly have. So keep that in mind. Anyhow, let's keep going. He failed. Eli couldn't do it. Everything had hurt too much. Eli just stayed stuck there, still lying at the mercy of this beast. The thing went away for a bit. Eli did nothing in the meanwhile. The sizzling blood in his veins immobilized him. Eventually, Eventually they came back, broom in hand, and swept up the glass in a corner of the kitchen. Then they knelt down, avoiding Eli's gaze, white circles staring into the corner of glass shards. Eli resisted his body's orders and moved. The pain surged back stronger, making him hiss. This snapped the monster out of their trance. They grabbed the tweezer. Eli stayed still, hoping they wouldn't pluck out his eyes. They grabbed his leg, and adrenaline surged through Eli. Sorry. Hang on. Sorry, just had to do a stretch real quick. Um, Eli strikes me as a smart character, and so I feel like he would give more pause to the creature, presenting him with tweezers and the bandage, right? Because obviously that's like a gesture of goodwill, and Eli can still like look at it skeptically, right? Like, you know, maybe this monster is just trying to gain my trust so that it can like kill me after the fact, right? Whatever. Um, but I think he should suspect, at least in part, that maybe this thing has good intentions, right? Yeah. He doesn't have to know that for a fact, but it should be a possibility in his mind because it's a possibility in the reader's mind and probably in the writer's mind too, right? So, yeah. Maybe if we had a sense of how old Eli was, so we could know, like, how naive he might be. But, like, he's still acting in this situation. He's still moving. He's not petrified with fear, right? And so I feel like he must, I don't know, have some wits about him anyway. Eli stayed still, hoping they wouldn't pluck his eyes out. They grabbed his leg, and adrenaline surged through. You can just say him, right? Same thing we talked about earlier with the psychic distance, because we're using they, them pronouns for the creature. So if you use the him pronoun, we're going to know that that's Eli, right? Adrenaline surged through him. He tried to shake it off, but the monster still had a grip. Eli reached over and scratched their right hand with every bit of power he had. They backed away, letting go. Small drips of blood trickled from where Eli scratched. The beast stayed still, watching. No expression on their face. Nothing. They approached closer, slower. From a distance, they tried to pluck out the glass, stuck in Eli's feet. Eli resisted a lot. Not necessary. You can just say Eli resisted, pulling away and moving constantly. He calmed when one shard fell off, pain instantly easing. Soon, the other bloody shard dropped onto the cold, hard floor. The beast then opened the box, napkins and bottles of liquid hiding inside. They poured some of the liquid onto the napkin, a familiar alcoholic smell to it. They rubbed the napkin onto the wound, pain striking throughout Eli's body. He moved and squirmed for a few seconds until that surging pain stopped. The monster stood patiently, wrapped the fabric around his feet when Eli calmed. The soft bandages eased the pain by a little bit. Rephrase. Eli continued to cautiously breathe during all of this. The monster then stepped away, staring at the boy. Faint beads of sweat appeared on their face. They both stayed at this stalemate for a while, pure silence. Eli tried to move again, the pain easing just a bit. Still, after managing to stand on his shaking feet, he crumbled, the looming monster towering above him, with the penetrating stare that made Eli freeze. One thing I've begun to notice is that we're using a lot of gerunds here, verbs that end in ing, like the looming monster towering above him. There was another one earlier. Yeah, Eli resisted a lot, pulling away and moving constantly. Pulling, moving, right? Uh, the same professor who I've brought up a few times has also told me that verbs are the thrust of any sentence, and because action is the thrust of any story, and verbs are the action, right? And really, when you use a gerund, you're kind of taking away the verb's power a little bit, right? You could rephrase this as Eli resisted. He pulled away and moved constantly. And then down here with that other sentence, the monster or the looming monster towered above him, which honestly like feels a little redundant because looming and towering both mean the same thing, right? You could even just say the monster towered above him or the monster loomed over him, right? Either or. Um, then you get the clarity, you get the action of the verb, and ultimately what you get when you do that is the story, right? Anyway, I hope that's clear. Let's just keep going. I do want to say I'm gripped, right? I'm very interested in what's going on here. Let's go to the end of the chapter and then we'll call it there. Where were we? Eli tried to move again, the pain easing. Yeah, the looming monster towering above him with penetrating stare that made Eli freeze. What was he supposed to do? What were they waiting for? Eli glanced back up to the white eyes. They looked away after meeting contact, the silence being the only communication between them. So Eli tried again, thinking that the void monster just wanted him gone. Whimpering, his feet still shaking no matter how much he begged for it to end, the boy got up. The beast was still looming over him, even with Eli standing up. The hand reached out and they slowly approached Eli. He tried to step back, but the monster was making a sort of signal with their hands. A sign, not one that the boy knew, but it was sign language. After hesitating, the monster slowly reached over to Eli's wrist to grab the large sleeve of his jacket. They pulled Eli towards the dark hallway, entering the room they had entered from. Eli had let it happen, his speeding heart slowly by a fraction. What? Oh, his speeding heart slowing by a fraction. A light flicked on, revealing a bedroom. Gray paint on the wall, photos and paintings scattered on the wall. They were mostly landscape ones of trees, beaches, mountains, several different kinds. The beast led Eli to the bed, letting go of his sleeve. I haven't been pointing it out anymore, but there's still a lot of using the same word twice in the same sentence. So be conscious of that. Maybe this was the way for help. At least he wasn't dead yet. Maybe he should just comply. What else was there to do? He got on, the beast pulling a cover over him. Eli looked at the monster, trying to get something out of them. Nothing. Nothing but an averting gaze. They slowly trudged out of the room, shutting off the light. Eli laid there, breathing, still alive, the lake's pull on his skeleton still fresh. A miserable parasite in his mind grew larger, influencing his eyes to plunge deep into sleep. He wanted to stay awake, stay alive, not fall down. He didn't want to sink down in that immobile, unconscious slumber, but it was all his body could do. Eli clutched his camera, rubbing the stickers on it as he sunk into the bed. He was seeming relatively safe, right? He'd wake up from this dream, and his camera would be fixed, right? His father would be worried, but still manage to find him, right? He was going to be okay, right? Again, rule of threes. Too many rights in this paragraph. Like, just do 3 or even less, frankly. All right, that takes us to the end of the chapter. And I gotta say, I'm intrigued. It looks like the next chapter takes place probably from the perspective of the monster, the creature there, which neato. Um, yeah, to go over kind of my main points of critique again. Again, start the story at the most interesting point, which, in my opinion, is where Eli and the creature meet for the first time. Um, Start the story there, and then give the added context as we go. Sneak it in, right? You want your reader to be gripped. And you can do that because you have a really interesting concept here. Like I said, I was gripped. I was seated. I wanted to know what was going to happen next. I, frankly, I want to know about this creature, right? Because it's very peculiar, very interesting. So start your story there, really captivate your reader, and then you can start explaining things to them. My other main piece of critique would be what I said earlier about how I feel like there's a lot of editorializing when there doesn't need to be, right? The story is engaging enough. It's interesting. It's curious. It's peculiar, like I said. So just tell the story, right? Just let the action speak for itself. There can be moments of reflection, right? But let those moments come from Eli. Like, you don't have to literally spell out his thoughts, right? The narrator can express Eli's thoughts on his behalf. But like I said, right, where the action is hottest, the words should be coolest. The words should be easy to follow because we want to be part of the action, right? The words should not be distracting us from the action. The author should not be distracting us from the story, or the narrator, rather. The narrator should not be distracting us from the story. And that was a lesson that I really had to get like hammered into me. And sometimes I still kind of slip up. Sometimes I do find myself editorializing too much. But that's not what writing's all about, right? Writing is about the story. Ultimately, we as authors are vehicles for the story, right? And when we do that editorializing, it's like we're putting our voice above the story's voice, which really shouldn't happen, right? Ultimately, we're just a vehicle. We have a story to tell, and we need to let that story tell itself through us. And we can do that. We just can't get in the way, right? We need to get out of our own way when it comes to writing and storytelling. And like I said, that was a hard lesson for me to learn. I really had to have it hammered into me. Um, like, frankly, this is a lot better than where I was even, like, a year ago. I was getting in my own way far too much, and this really is not even comparable to what I was doing. I was, like, so all over the place. So this is a lot better than where I was. So, really, there's really not too much editing that I think needs to happen here. Um, and, you can keep the imagery, of course. There should be other elements going on here. Setting, obviously, is really important. Um, Stories don't have to just be action, action, action. But at the same time, like I said, you want the story to be told, right? And that's what the reader comes for ultimately is to have a story told to them. And they don't want anything getting in the way of that. Setting is a necessary part of telling the story. Imagery in its own way is a necessary part of telling the story, right? So anyway, I hope this is all clear. It's hard to do. Writing is hard. But I think you've got the great beginnings of a story here. I'm curious to know what's going to happen. I think you should continue with this, but like I said, just let the story tell itself, right? Be the vehicle for the story to tell itself. So we're going to leave things there. Best boy, thank you for submitting this. This was a fun read, and I hope you continue with it. Yeah, we'll just leave it there. Thank you, best boy. Thank you, viewer, for watching. And ultimately, keep in mind, this is a rough draft.